In the warm waters of the Atlantic, just east of the Bahamas, a veteran cargo ship and her crew met a storm they couldn't outrun. It was October 2015 when the SS Faro, a steel giant with decades of service behind her, departed from Jacksonville, Florida, bound for San Juan, Puerto Rico. The voyage was routine, the kind her crew had completed countless times before. But far out at sea, as Hurricane Joaquin gathered strength, that sense of routine would shatter. What followed was a harrowing sequence of mechanical failures, rising floodwaters, and urgent radio calls, culminating in the ship's final plunge into one of the deepest parts of the Atlantic. For Maritime Mishaps, this is a deeper dive into the story of the Faro, a tale of warning signs unheeded, of a storm underestimated, and of a captain's final stand aboard a ship caught in the jaws of a Category 4 hurricane. The SS Faro was a US-flagged cargo vessel with a long and complex operational history that spanned 4 decades. Originally built in 1975 by Sun Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Pennsylvania, the ship was launched under the name SS Puerto Rico as part of the Ponce-class series, designed specifically for transporting goods between the mainland United States and Puerto Rico. For 15 years, it operated in this trade route under Navieras de Puerto Rico, serving as a dependable freight link. In 1991, the vessel changed ownership and was renamed the Northern Lights. 2 years later, it underwent a significant transformation at the Atlantic Marine Shipyard in Alabama, where a 90-foot midsection was added, expanding its cargo capacity. After the refit, Northern Lights primarily operated in the Pacific Northwest, transporting cargo between Tacoma, Washington, and Anchorage, Alaska. In the early 2000s, the ship was chartered by the US government to support military logistics during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Between 2003 and 2005, it made numerous trips to the Middle East, carrying thousands of pieces of military equipment across international waters. This sometimes occurred under dangerous conditions, including a missile attack while navigating the Persian Gulf in March 2003. By 2006, the vessel had returned to commercial service. It was renamed Faro and placed back into the Caribbean shipping circuit, operated by Sea Star Line, a subsidiary of Tote Maritime. At that time, Faro was converted into a hybrid roll-on, roll-off and lift-on, lift-off ROCON container ship, capable of transporting both wheeled and crane-loaded cargo. This conversion included the installation of cranes, the addition of nearly 5,000 tons of fixed ballast for stability, and a raised load line to increase cargo capacity. However, despite these modifications, a critical damage stability assessment was never completed, leaving a gap in the ship's safety credentials. Structurally, Faro measured nearly 791 feet in length and had a beam of 105 feet. It was equipped with a single fixed-pitch propeller and could reach speeds up to 22 knots. The ship's layout included multiple upper decks for navigation and living quarters, a main deck for containers, and several lower decks for rolling cargo. At the time of its final voyage, Faro was certified for operation under US Coast Guard regulations, having passed its most recent inspections in early 2015. The vessel was regarded as seaworthy and fit for route and service. Despite its long service life and various roles, from civilian cargo to military transport, Faro's final days were marked by preparations for a shift back to Alaska routes, a plan that would never come to fruition. On October 1st, 2015, while en route from Jacksonville, Florida to San Juan, Puerto Rico, Faro encountered Hurricane Joaquin in the Atlantic Ocean, the type of storm it could not and would not survive. On September 29th, 2015, the Faro was docked at Blount Island Terminal in Jacksonville, Florida. Her destination was San Juan, a run she routinely made every week. as crew and dock workers loaded the vessel with over 11,000 tons of cargo. A storm began brewing in the Atlantic. Initially classified as a tropical depression, this system rapidly intensified. By the time El Faro cast off her lines that evening, the storm had already been named Joaquin. Captain Michael Davidson reviewed weather forecasts, most notably from a private software service called Bon Voyage system, which was already lagging behind publicly available National Weather Service updates. Still, Davidson chose to proceed along the usual route east of the Bahamas, despite the storm's unpredictable trajectory. According to transcripts retrieved later from the Voyage Data Recorder, or VDR, he believed the ship would pass safely to the south of the hurricane's projected path. By the following morning, September 30th, Joaquin had intensified into a Category 1 hurricane. El Faro adjusted its course slightly to the south in response. Conversations recorded on the bridge reflected rising concern among the crew. Equipment problems, such as a faulty anemometer used to measure wind speed and direction, limited the crew's situational awareness. As weather conditions worsened, it became clear that El Faro was moving closer to the heart of the storm, not away from it. Throughout the night and into the early hours of October 1st, conditions on board deteriorated rapidly. The crew began experiencing severe rolling and pitching. Containers on deck broke free, and water began to flood into the ship. At 5:09 a.m., the chief mate called the captain to report a heavy list to starboard. At 5:43 a.m., Captain Michael Davidson received a troubling call. Water was entering the number 3 cargo hold. He dispatched the chief mate to investigate. Crew members immediately began trying to figure out where the flooding was coming from and how to control it. Roughly 30 minutes later, things got worse. The ship's propulsion system, the very thing keeping them mobile, had failed. El Faro drifted without power in a worsening sea. Winds were now in excess of 100 knots, and waves towered over 30 feet. The crew attempted to assess and counter flood compartments, trying to balance the ship, but with the loss of propulsion and increasing water ingress, the situation grew increasingly grim. The ship's final communications painted a picture of mounting chaos. By 6:54, the captain had taken another call, this time confirming the gravity of the situation. He explained that high winds were hammering the ship's starboard side, and a scuttle, a type of watertight hatch, had either been left open or blown open, allowing water to flood in. Though the crew was safe at that moment, Davidson made clear they were in a dire situation. He reassured the caller that they weren't yet abandoning ship, and that engineers were working to restore power. At 7:06, Davidson radioed Tote Services emergency line to report the propulsion failure and the ship's condition. He told an emergency contact the following: "We had a hull breach. A scuttle blew open during the storm. We have water down in 3 hold. We have a heavy list. We've lost the main propulsion unit. The engineers cannot get it going." Davidson also radioed in their position, about 48 miles east of San Salvador, and relayed that despite the crew's best efforts, they were losing the battle to control the flooding. Yet even in the face of the storm's ferocity, swells of 10 to 12 feet, howling winds and poor visibility, Davidson maintained that staying aboard was the safer option. At 7:10, he shared that the ship was listing between 10 to 15 degrees and decided it was time to notify the Coast Guard. He ordered the second mate to activate the ship's emergency alert systems and begin waking the rest of the crew. By 7:15 a.m., the chief mate had returned to the bridge with more grim news. Water levels were rising. It was suspected that the fire main, one of the ship's key systems for firefighting, had been damaged, possibly from something striking it. The captain asked whether the leak could be stopped. The chief mate couldn't give a confident answer, only guesses. At 7:17, the chief engineer reported an alarm from another compartment, more flooding. The captain asked if multiple holds could be pumped out simultaneously and inquired again about the worsening list. The chief mate explained that vehicles in the number 3 hold had started floating, making it difficult to determine where water was coming in, especially since the area was now submerged. In an attempt to stop more seawater from entering, Davidson instructed the engineer to isolate the fire main system, essentially to seal it off from the sea using internal valves in the engine room. Despite their efforts, flooding continued to spread. Davidson described worsening conditions. Right now, it's a little hard to tell because all the wind is on that side too, but it's not getting any better. He insisted on staying with the ship, emphasizing that abandoning it in such severe weather would be even riskier. By 7:24, Davidson still believed the vessel retained enough buoyancy and stability to survive, but it was clear that the tipping point was near. He gave the order to sound the general alarm and wake everyone aboard. Within a minute, he called out the words that signaled the crew's last hope: "Abandon ship." Moments later, he reported that the bow, the front of the vessel, was dipping below the waves. Over the radio, he shouted for everyone to throw life rafts overboard and evacuate. The following minutes captured a chilling attempt to escape. Davidson remained on the bridge, trying to calm and assist a terrified helmsman. As alarms blared, he repeated soothing commands. "Work your way up here. You're okay, come on. I'm not leaving you, let's go." The helmsman, overcome with panic, cried out for help, begging for a ladder, a line, someone to guide him. The final words recorded on the VDR came at 7:39 a.m. Davidson, still by the helmsman's side, uttered his last command: "It's time to come this way." The recorder fell silent after that. The El Faro disappeared beneath the waves in the grasp of Hurricane Joaquin, taking all 33 souls aboard with her. Her last known position was near the eye of the Category 4 storm. It would take weeks before search and rescue teams found the wreck, lying 15,000 feet deep in the Atlantic. As Hurricane Joaquin continued to rage across the Atlantic, the disappearance of the SS El Faro triggered a massive search effort. On October 1st, the US Air Force Reserve deployed WC-130J aircraft in hopes of locating the missing cargo ship, but no trace was found. The next day, the US Coast Guard launched their own dedicated operation, sending out an HC-130 Hercules from its Clearwater, Florida air station. This effort was soon reinforced by the US CGC Northland and an MH-60 Jayhawk helicopter from the same base. Despite facing brutal conditions, winds surpassing 100 knots, wave heights of up to 40 feet, and visibility near zero, search teams continued their mission. Helicopters from air stations in Miami and Puerto Rico, along with fixed-wing aircraft like the Ocean Sentry, joined the operation. Amid the storm's wrath on October 3rd, a Coast Guard helicopter managed to retrieve a life ring marked with El Faro's name, a sign of what lay ahead. By October 4th, the hurricane had moved northeast, offering a window of calmer weather. Seizing the opportunity, a helicopter crew remained airborne for 11 continuous hours, refueling mid-air to extend their time in the sky. Additional resources, including the USCGC Charles Sexton, Resolute, and another unnamed HC-130, were dispatched to expand the search grid. That night, crews used night vision goggles to search in darkness, praying for a miracle. On October 5th, a Navy P-8 Poseidon joined the search from Naval Air Station Jacksonville, and several tugboats from Crowley Maritime were added to the mission. That same day, searchers discovered a body in a survival suit, believed to be from the El Faro crew. However, due to a failure in a tracking device, the body was never recovered. Additional survival suits were also found adrift, yet unopened. The most sobering discoveries came next: a heavily damaged and empty lifeboat, one of just 2 on board, along with a deflated life raft. Each lifeboat had been capable of holding 43 people, complete with emergency supplies, but neither had been used. On October 5th, officials declared El Faro lost at sea. With no survivors found, the mission shifted from rescue to recovery. By October 6th, 3 more Air Force and Air National Guard HC-130 aircraft joined the effort. In total, the search covered more than 183,000 square nautical miles. Debris fields were located, one near the ship's last known position and another about 60 nautical miles northeast. On October 7th, the Coast Guard officially called off the search. Following the end of the search operations, the US Navy sent a salvage team to locate the wreckage. That same day, Senator Bill Nelson of Florida called for an investigation into Tote Maritime's policies, especially regarding weather risk and the outdated lifeboats aboard El Faro. On October 9th, the company established a relief fund for the families through the Seamen's Church Institute. The legal fallout came swiftly. On October 14th, a $100 million lawsuit accused Tote of negligence, arguing that the vessel was not seaworthy and should never have sailed into a hurricane. By late October, another suit followed, likening El Faro without power to a cork in the sea. In total, Tote eventually reached financial settlements with 18 of the 33 victims' families, paying over $7 million in damages. The MV Isla Bella was later assigned to replace El Faro on its trade route. On October 19th, the Navy deployed USNS Apache to begin the underwater search for El Faro. Using sonar, a pinger locator, and a remotely operated vehicle, the crew identified the ship's remains by October 31st at a depth of roughly 15,000 feet, where the surrounding water pressure exceeded 6,600 pounds per square inch. The ship was upright and intact, but the voyage data recorder could not be located. On January 3, 2016, the NTSB publicly released early findings, including underwater photos and video. Months later, in April, a second recovery mission using the research vessel Atlantis successfully located the VDR, but it was trapped near the mast and could not be retrieved. A final effort in August, once again using USNS Apache, succeeded in recovering the recorder. It was delivered to the NTSB in Mayport, Florida, 10 months after the disaster. The US Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigation completed its final report in September 2017. The 199-page document placed significant blame on Captain Michael Davidson, citing his failure to avoid the storm, his reliance on outdated weather data, and his delayed response to the crisis. The report concluded that Davidson had underestimated both the storm's danger and his ship's vulnerabilities. Had he survived, the Coast Guard said his actions would have justified revoking his license. The Coast Guard also criticized TOTE for systemic failures. The company had no dedicated safety officer overseeing El Faro, improperly logged crew work and rest hours, and failed to replace the vessel's outdated open lifeboats, types long since phased out on modern ships. In December 2017, the NTSB issued its own comprehensive report. It echoed many of the Coast Guard's conclusions. The board emphasized that Davidson ignored multiple suggestions from officers to change course and relied on weather data that was nearly 12 hours out of date. The NTSB also criticized the Coast Guard for allowing ships to continue operating with substandard safety equipment under grandfather clauses. The report identified several contributing factors to the loss of the ship and all 33 lives on board. These included the open scuttle that allowed water to flood the number, 3 cargo hold, damaged seawater piping, the loss of propulsion due to oil pressure failure, downflooding through unsecured vents, and the lack of a proper damage control plan. The NTSB also cited the ship's deficient safety management system and the absence of modern survival equipment as key reasons why no one survived. Ultimately, El Faro's sinking became more than just a maritime mishap. It became a painful reminder of the human and institutional failures that can pile up unnoticed until it is far too late. It also highlights a vital lesson. Don't steer your ship directly into the eye wall of a Category 4 hurricane.